During a live talk show, an unexpected moment unfolded when Will Smith tried to crack a joke about President Ibrahim Traoré. Instead of laughing or taking offense, Traoré responded with quiet strength and clarity. His calm reply cut deeper than any angry retort could have. Will Smith's face changed, the atmosphere shifted, and the audience sat in stunned silence. That clip has since gone viral, hailed as a masterclass in dignity, leadership, and truth. The set was glowing under studio lights, full of energy. It was evening with celebrities, a special night with an impressive guest list. On one side sat Will Smith, beloved star of stage and screen. On the other, President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, composed and modest in a plain suit. The segment was meant to be playful, a bit of light banter. The host grinned, then turned to Will with a chuckle. "So, Will ever thought about running for president? You'd be up against this man." Will laughed easily, then quipped, "Well, I'd at least bring a little fashion." "No shade, President, but it looks like your tailor gave up halfway." The crowd burst into laughter. Traoré smiled gently. Will clearly meant no harm. It was just another late-night style jab. But the air changed. Traoré leaned forward, clasped his hands, and waited for the laughter to settle. He met Will's gaze and spoke, not with anger or sarcasm, but with quiet conviction. What he said wasn't shocking. It was the weight in his voice that held the room still. "I don't wear power," Traoré began, soft but firm. "I carry it." The room fell silent. His eyes stayed kind. "Back home, there are children, learning under trees. Some walk for hours barefoot just to reach a classroom with no walls. If I wore a $5,000 suit, I'd be robbing them." Will's smile disappeared. Traoré continued, "You act in films that entertain and inspire the world. I live with decisions that determine whether my people live or die. Every choice I make, even in silence, carries weight. If fashion could heal a dying clinic, I'd wear gold daily," Traoré said. The room stayed still. No claps, no awkward chuckles. Just a powerful hush. His words weren't loud, but they were real, painfully, beautifully real. Will sat back, blinking slowly. Something had struck him, not the words alone, but the depth behind them. It wasn't about a joke anymore. It was about seeing the soul of the man he had teased. And in that pause, something rare happened. Tears welled up. In Will's eyes, he turned away quickly, but the cameras caught it. So did the world. Within hours, the moment was everywhere, played across platforms again and again. Backstage, the air was thick, not tense, just quiet. Will sat alone, water in hand, eyes lost in thought. Producer stepped near, asking softly, "You all right?" Will gave a slow nod but said nothing. Online, the clip had already exploded, just 90 seconds, titled "Will Smith Silenced by President Ibrahim Traoré." In under 2 hours, it hit over 1 million views. But this wasn't ordinary viral content. It was resonating. One viewer wrote, "That wasn't shade, that was a masterclass in grace." Another said, "My son and I watched together." Cried later, in the hallway, Will finally rose and walked toward a quiet room. Inside, Traoré was reading a small, worn book. Will paused, then stepped in. "Mr. President," Traoré looked up, smiling gently. Will's voice wavered. "I needed to hear that, thank you." Shook hands. Hollywood and the Sahel. And in that simple moment, the world saw something greater than viral fame. It saw respect. It saw truth. Humility. It saw two men from distant lives meet on common ground. By sunrise, the internet was ablaze. That President Ibrahim Traoré is quiet. Truth-laced words had crossed oceans. Major anchors aired the clip. Influencers filmed emotional reactions. Even networks that rarely mentioned African leaders now spoke his name. The phrase trending worldwide was simple: when dignity speaks, the world listens. In Burkina Faso, daily, life paused. Market vendors turned up their radios. From schoolyards to village squares, people watched and listened with pride. To them, he wasn't just a leader, he was a protector, a symbol of calm, strength, and human decency. In America, Will Smith posted a short video. "I made a joke. He gave me truth. I've met kings, legends, But this changed me. His voice was low, unscripted, humbled, and the world took note. Yet beyond the praise and headlines, something else stirred, something Traoré never aimed for. A message had taken roots, sincere and global. Without trying, he became more than a president. He became a reflection, quietly urging people to look inward. And soon more hearts would be moved. In a modest hospital in Ouagadougou, 11-year-old Muna was in the fight of her life, leukemia. The night before, she'd watched the interview. With her mother, her eyes lit up. "Mama, he's different." With trembling fingers, she wrote a note. "Can we send this to him?"
Wow.
Shh, she whispered. A nurse, overcome by the child's quiet strength, shared it online. The caption read, "She has only days left, but she wants her president to know he gave her hope." The letter read, "Dear President Traoré, I'm sick, but when I saw you on TV, I forgot my pain for a little while. You made me proud. You didn't yell. You didn't joke back. You spoke like a real papa. Thank you. I wish I could hug you." By midday, the tweet had soared to over 2 million likes. In a quiet room at the New York Embassy, President Traoré read the message in silence. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then slowly he rose, put on his coat, and turned to his staff. "Cancel the next meeting," he said calmly. "I'm going to call a child." In a small hospital room, Muna's mother answered the phone. "Confused? Hello?" A warm, gentle voice responded, "Madame, this is President Ibrahim Traoré. May I speak to your daughter, please?" The room went still. The nurse gasped. Muna's eyes lit up in wonder. The president's voice softened as he asked her favorite color, her favorite food. She smiled, pain forgotten. Then in a tiny voice she asked, "Are you really the man from TV?" Traoré chuckled kindly. "Yes, little one. But more than that, I'm your friend." Tears filled the room. Grown adults stood speechless. "You've done more today than many ever will," he told her. "You reminded the world how powerful kindness is. You're braver than I'll ever be, Muna." His voice cracked, just barely. After the call ended, Traoré sat alone. Watching the bustling city beyond the window, but in his heart, he was back in that hospital room, surrounded by quiet strength. That night, he made a vow. This moment wouldn't end with applause, would not be a trend. He would become a reason. Back at the studio, after the lights faded, silence lingered. Will Smith stood behind the curtain, hands trembling, Traoré's words echoing inside him. Round him, crew members stayed quiet, unsure how to respond. Top of form, bottom of form, trying to process what had just unfolded, Will slowly stepped forward. "You meant every word, didn't you?" he asked, voice low. Traoré nodded gently. "I don't speak to impress," he replied. "I speak because truth isn't a performance, it's a way of living. No flashing lights, no cheering crowd. Just two men, one celebrated for his charisma, the other revered for his quiet strength, sharing a moment stripped of ego." Traoré saw the softness in Will's eyes and said, "You carry the world's joy, Will. But have you ever let them see your sorrow?" The question didn't land. It sank deep. Will's lips parted, trembling, and he nodded slowly, tears welling again. Meanwhile, outside the studio, the world was already awake. Clips flooded timelines, not for gossip, but for grace. Yet what was coming next wasn't about views, it was about hearts opening. In a quiet home in Philadelphia, Caroline, Will's mother, watched the clip alone. She'd seen her son captivate audiences before, but never quite like this. She typed a message. "You've made films, baby. But tonight, you made meaning. That man reminded me of your father, strong, gentle, steady. Don't let this moment fade." Will stared at her words. You made meaning? He hadn't wept in front of his mother since boyhood. But now, the tears came freely. Something in Traoré's presence had shaken a buried truth about identity, depth, and what it means to be seen beyond the mask. With trembling hands, he opened his phone's notes app. For the first time in years, he wrote not a script, not a punchline, but a letter. A letter to the man who reached into his soul. By sunrise, Will posted it on Instagram, beside a photo of Traoré standing serene under studio lights. It read, "President Traoré, you didn't snap back. You didn't deflect with laughter. You gave me something far greater truth. In your calm, I saw my chaos. In your grace, I saw my fear. You reminded me maybe you reminded the world that strength isn't shown through volume or style, but through the way we carry what's real. Thank you. I'm listening now. I'm learning." The post went viral within minutes. Millions shared it. Leaders responded. Teens cried. Parents showed their kids. In Ouagadougou, Traoré's office was flooded with letters from every continent, but one stood out. Not from a celebrity, diplomat, or news anchor, but a handwritten note from a young boy in Harlem. The last line simply said, "I want to be quiet like you when they laugh at me." Traoré read it slowly, then looked up at his staff. "This is bigger than a moment on television," he said. "Something is shifting." Same night in Brooklyn, a boy named Marcus sat quietly on his bed. He had been teased at school, pushed around for his old shoes, mocked until he stopped talking. His mom brought him warm tea, but the pain stayed. Later, she came across the viral clip of President Traoré and turned up the sound. Marcus looked up. The line echoed through the room. "The world doesn't need louder men. It needs quieter hearts with deeper truths." He didn't move. He replayed it 10 times. Then he reached under his pillow and pulled out a wrinkled notebook. "Dear Mr. Traoré," he wrote. "They laughed. And me today. But I didn't yell. I remembered your words. I think that made me strong." He folded the page. He didn't know if he'd ever send it, but writing it gave him something rare. That night, for the first time in weeks, he slept, without waking. Back in Ouagadougou, President Traoré sat at his desk, scrolling through a flood of messages his team had gathered. His staff had filtered the messages. But one email stopped him in his tracks. It was a scanned, handwritten letter from a boy named Marcus. President Traoré read it 3 times in silence. Then, still looking out the window, he said softly to his aide, "We govern nations. But sometimes, we're just here to hold one child's hurt." He didn't hesitate. Arrange a call. That evening, Marcus was called to the counselor's office at school. His chest tightened. Had he done something wrong? Instead, they handed him a phone. "Hello?" he asked. A calm voice replied, "This is Ibrahim Traoré. I read your letter." Marcus froze. He thought it was a prank, but the voice continued. "Gently, you are braver than many grown-ups I've met. And today, you gave me hope." Tears came, not loud sobs, but quiet, trembling ones, the kind that fall when you feel truly seen. The very next day, without cameras or fanfare, Will Smith landed in Ouagadougou. No designer clothes, no security detail, just himself. When Traoré greeted him, he smiled. "I didn't expect Hollywood to arrive so quietly," he said. Will laughed softly, then grew serious. "I came because you didn't just move me, you shifted something in me." They sat beneath a tree in the courtyard of a local school while children played nearby, unaware that something historic was happening just feet away. Will handed Traoré a small folded page. "It's a list," he said. "Every person I owe. An apology, 2 for words, actions, or pain I projected while carrying my own." Traoré read the page carefully, then nodded. "Real healing doesn't start by changing the world, damned. It begins by telling ourselves the truth." A little girl ran up and handed Will a flower. He knelt, smiled. It wasn't fumit, it was peace. It wasn't a grand moment built for spotlight. It wasn't for applause or headlines. But to Will, it felt more real, more human than anything he'd experienced in years. And the cameras, they were never the point. In a small barbershop on the dusty edge of Ouagadougou, a group of young men huddled around an old TV, its screen flickering, was showing that moment when a joke paused the world, and Traoré's quiet strength rippled outward. One young man, Idris, blinked back tears. "I've never seen a president speak from his soul," he whispered. The barber, an old man who had seen decades of change, gave a slow nod. He wasn't just talking to Will. He was talking to all of us who've been mocked for being soft, for not being loud. In that modest space, something shifted. It wasn't just a trending clip, it became a mirror. He switched off the screen. No one spoke right away, not from discomfort, but because they had just witnessed something honest in a world often wrapped in noise. 2 days later, a handwritten envelope arrived at the Burkina Faso embassy in Los Angeles. Name on it? Jada Pinkett Smith. She had seen the clip live, then watched it again, then wept. Her note wasn't polished, it was raw. Dear President Traoré, I don't think you realize what you gave us. Not just will, but men around the world have never been told that quiet is not weakness, that dignity doesn't demand dominance. With no shouting, no defense, you showed strength. Traoré read it in silence, then folded it gently and slid it into his journal. Turning to his aide, he said softly, "The world doesn't need louder voices, it needs deeper silences." Followed by quiet but powerful actions, something unusual began unfolding across continents. Clips of Traoré's words were translated into Mandarin, Arabic, French, Portuguese, even Swahili. It's not for clicks, not for trends, but because, somehow, it felt like truth had finally spoken out loud. University panels discussed it, therapists wrote columns, let faith leaders in churches and mosques quoted it. People weren't just watching, they were stopping, thinking, feeling. One late-night host who had joked about it on day one returned with a sincere apology. "I thought it was just another cringy talk show exchange," she said. "But now, I know I was watching history whisper, not shout." In Burkina Faso, a village school named its modest library the quiet voice of truth, honoring Traoré. The moment had moved beyond celebrity, beyond television. It had become a shift. Mirror the world could not look away from. 3 days later, Will Smith appeared, done announced in a daytime program in New York. No polished speech, no clever lines, just a mic, a chair, and a man clearly changed. "I've made films. I've made people laugh for decades," he said, voice breaking. "But I've never had a moment stop me like that one." He paused, when President Traoré looked at me. It felt like he saw past the jokes, past the mask, all the way to the weight I didn't know I was carrying. Not just me, but all of us. The room sat in stillness. Then he added, he reminded me that manhood isn't found in noise or control, it's found in peace. A few tears quietly fell. That same night, Traoré's aide rushed in. "It's from Weil, an email. It was brief, but honest. I've spoken to the world with charm, now I want to speak to you with truth. I'd like to visit Ouagadougou. Not as a star, just as a man." Traoré read it and smiled softly. "Let him come," he said. "Let him see that truth isn't grown in marble halls, it's born in struggle." The next day, Will Smith arrived quietly in Burkina Faso. No press, no flashbulbs, just Traoré, waiting in a plain shirt, hand extended. They embraced, saying nothing at first, they didn't need to. In that moment, two lives shaped by different worlds met in shared understanding, a moment history would not erase. On the 6th day, a small press event took place outside a youth center in Ouagadougou. Will stood beside Traoré and spoke, voice clear. This man didn't clap back. He didn't match pride with pride. He did something stronger. He chose grace. He showed us what real dignity looks like. He paused, his eyes wet. "If you're watching, when was the last time you truly listened with your heart?" Traoré stepped forward, calm as ever. "We don't heal by mocking," he said. "We heal by seeing the wounds are as in others." No applause followed. Just as still, moved silence. The clip went online. Within a day, over 40 million views. But more than numbers, it stirred souls. People cried not for drama, but because something honest had been placed in front of them. Dear viewer, if even a second of this story touched you, if one line made your chest ache, subscribe, like, and share your thoughts below. Not for the algorithm, but so someone else might feel what you did. Tell us what stayed with you. Let this be a beginning, not a goodbye.